Hi, welcome to You Haven't Seen What? A married couple's quest to rectify the wrongs of their partner never seeing culturally relevant movies.
Are they all going to be culturally relevant or just most of them?
I mean, they're all culturally relevant, duh.
I guess to someone, even Zapped is relevant.
Hi, my name is Joelle. And that gentleman over there is Parry.
So have we mentioned that the married couple in question is us?
The married couple in question is us. We're not newlyweds, but not olyweds. We're sort of in that in-between mix, but we've known each other for 20 plus years. So that kind of makes us definitely not newlyweds.
Yes, although we haven't been watching movies together for 20 plus years.
No, because I would shoot myself. You'll understand when we do Mosquito Coast.
Yes, as you will come to find, many of my selections tend to get under Joe's skin a bit.
A bit.
But, you know, I think in bringing this podcast together, the idea came from the fact that when you're getting to know someone, there's always going to be those deal breaker films, those favorite films that if the person that you're going out with doesn't like it or has never seen it, that's a real problem. Now, most of the films we're going to look at are not the deal breakers, because honestly, if Joe had never seen, Back to the Future or Empire Strikes Back or certain films, we probably would have had to take care of that before we got married and figured out if we were fully compatible. But a lot of these are films that mean something to one of us, or just a film we saw in the 80s and have memories about and really want the other to experience.
So what you've just learned is that Parry is extremely verbose, and I'm not so verbose. So essentially, these are films that the other one loves and was super surprised that the other one hadn't seen, considering that Parry has pretty much seen everything in life. It's sort of hard. But what the trend that you will notice is that a lot of the movies that he likes are definite, and that I haven't seen, are definitely more sci-fi, horror related, or deeply introspective and dark, very dark. And the ones that Parry really hasn't seen are sort of more light and fluffy, definitely that romance comedy era of the 80s. That I dearly love.
And as it turns out, there were a hell of a lot of movies made in the 80s. And I saw a lot of them. Joe saw a lot of them. There's a few that neither of us have ever seen. But it was shocking to both of us what movies the other hadn't seen. Hence the title. Say it again, Joe.
You haven't seen what?
Exactly. And that's the shock and surprise that the other would give when, say, for example, I said, "Oh, I've never seen A Chorus Line."
You've never seen what?
Yes, that's exactly how it went down, except I think with a more, no fucking way you haven't seen that.
Okay, maybe. I was trying to be PG in our first podcast, but apparently you want to raise the level to PG-13.
Just a little bit.
Okay, that's fine. I can definitely run with that.
I definitely think that there were some expletives that were included in that discussion.
Yeah, because one singular sensation. Anyway, we'll get to that one. But today, really, our focus is going to be on Blade Runner, the final cut. And in starting this podcast, we actually had the debate. Actually, I posed the question, hey, wasn't this really released, this edition, this cut, if you will, really released in 2007 to celebrate the anniversary? So we had an inner debate, but we still wanted to go ahead and cover it because it's just so topical, considering that the sequel just came out and how next year will be 2019. So we really wanted to cover Blade Runner. Thought it was amazing. I've never seen it until Parry showed it to me, and I'm definitely the better for seeing this particular movie.
So, yeah, we started with Blade Runner because we figured we would go big for the first one, because Blade Runner is the film that has, I think, probably ended hundreds of relationships, friendships, spawned a million websites. Just the level of discussion and argument that people have over this film.
There's so not even an argument. I know what you're about to say. Is Harrison Ford a replicant? I don't even understand why we're even having this discussion.
But the isn't he questioned?
It's so obvious.
It is obvious, but there are whole lists of people who made the film who think he is not, including Harrison Ford. generally, although he seems to waffle a little more now.
I won't
But
say anything derogatory about anyone because my mama taught me better than that. But I'm just saying.
I believe he is too, but I am going to present a compelling argument that I heard as to why it may be a better film that he is not.
Okay, so for everybody, if you can, Parry, let's give a really short synopsis. Can you do it?
Let's see. Ex-detective, burned out detective who is a Blade Runner, which means that he hunts replicants, which are artificial humans that have been on the scene for a while. But, you know, anytime you create a machine, as we found out in the movies, that's going to do a human's work, they're usually going to rebel against you. And so anytime a replicant rebels, comes to Earth, because they are forbidden and illegal on Earth, but whenever they come to Earth, they have to be hunted down and retired, as the title scroll tells us, which means basically killed.
Okay, that was actually pretty short. I'm really impressed with you right now.
But that's only the basic idea. Then
Okay.
to get into the plot...
No. Let's not do that. So, yeah, it's a loose adaptation of Philip K. Dick's 1968 Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Although the title does not come from that. Did you know where the title comes from?
I actually do know where the title comes from because I did research.
Indeed you did. Because that's what you do best.
Apparently. So I do know where the title comes from. It was actually taken, and Ridley Scott wanted the title specifically. So he actually garnered the title from, I forget now.
William S. Burroughs.
There you go. Exactly. He garnered the tie, and it was Blade Runner, all one word. And he separated the two.
Yep. It was a book title. It was actually about... what is it? Medical industry, medical insurance gone wrong.
I didn't get that far.
But yeah, it's Blade Runner was taken from that because it just sounded cooler than Dark Days and a couple other titles that they originally had for the film.
All right, so let's get down to the crux of the matter. How did Blade Runner make you feel? What's your takeaway?
My takeaway, the cool thing about a film like Blade Runner is, of course, the takeaway is always different. Even if you've watched it just a couple days before, there's always something else that you take out of it. But I think that the big theme of the film is, if you make a machine that can no longer tell that it is a machine, and no one else can tell the difference, what is human? So I guess, what is the nature of humanity? You know, what makes us human? And some might say it's having a soul. Some might say it's the ability to be sentient and understand our own existence. But again, you know, Terrell and with the Replicants seems to have tried to create that in Rachel, where she is sentient and self-aware, even without knowing she's a machine. So what is a human?
So, and that actually brings us to the title of this podcast, which is from the movie. And it's more human than human, right? So that's what Terrell says. More human than human is our motto. And so what I sort of took from that whole thing is this idea of human versus replicant, and then this in between, right? This Blade Runner, who you're not quite sure of, well, for a bit, I guess. You're not quite sure of if he's a replicant or not, or if he's human. And the fact that these replicants bleed when they're shot, that they can show emotion, that they are fighting for their own survival. So you have a lot of this, what is human, what's replicant, and then you have an in-between in Harrison Ford's character, Deckard, right? So as the Blade Runner, kind of straddling of both worlds, if you will.
And yes, we are talking about Blade Runner and not Westworld, which explores many of the same themes and has a main character named Ford.
Or iRobot, which explores many of the same themes. But that's all about cultural relevance, right? The idea that Blade Runner was not a box office hit, but so culturally relevant.
And more so as time goes on, the discussion of AI gets deeper. But here's my big question, and we see this as a recurring theme in films for decades. What does it say about us as humans that we always want to create something that looks like us and thinks like us, and then use it for entertainment and as a slave to do the jobs we don't want to do?
It says a lot. I mean, it says a lot about marriages, let's just be real, and companionship, and our ideas of what an ideal person would look like, sound like, feel like, what they would do for us in the relationship, what we would bring into the relationship. Oftentimes, I think you and I have had this discussion so many times. Oftentimes, we think of a person that we marry as being this ideal person, right? Or we foster this notion of what the perfect person would look like or feel like. So with the replicants, that's exactly what we've done. They've become, and by giving them emotions, they become companions, right? So that's what Rachel really is to Tyrell at that point, is a companion, or the sex slaves that they had, right?
Because we still want to be able to control them, even though we've given them sort of the illusion of agency. They, of their own agency and their own self-determination to some degree. We still want to be able to control them. And that's where it gets really problematic. And, everything from the Matrix to Colossus, the Forbin Project, all of them have sort of touched on this same idea of when a machine realizes it's being used and it wants its own freedom, what happens?
And then aren't humans actually all machines in a way? I'm just saying.
And who's the good guy?
And who's the good guy and who's the guy with social control? Anyway.
By the way, Joelle is an international criminology PhD candidate right now. So that might explain some of her angle.
So social control and crime and utilization of social control in order to control mass population. Yeah, all those awesome themes.
So back around to the takeaway, the question always is, what does this film make you think about, and what question does it make you ask? And of course, as you've just seen, it generates a lot of discussion, not just about what Deckard is, but about what the morality.
I still don't understand the conversation about what Deckard is. It's so painfully obvious that he's a replicant. Even without seeing the unicorn at the end or the unicorn scene, it's just obvious that he's a replicant whenever he's dealing with Rachel.
By the way, if you've never seen the film, we're really not going to get into detail of explaining the unicorn, daydream, and origami. Just go and watch it. We'll pause, you come back, and then we'll talk about it some more.
Yeah, the link for the DVD for the final cut will be up on the website, as well as the links for everything else that we're mentioning.
Yeah, our purpose is not going to be do a full synopsis of the films, but to discuss different topics within them.
So let's get into the nitty gritty, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Dun, 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 dun. Wait, I feel like we need that like Western right? Dun, dun, dun.
The Ennio Morricone.
Of course, you know the freaking proper word. Oh my god.
No, it's the composer. Spaghetti westerns.
Help
Italian.
me. I'm living with that person.
You know what? We never did answer the thing though. You were just asking me a question right before this. The argument as to him being a replicant. The argument that was made.
Oh no.
Was that in the book, it is made clear he is not. And Ford has said that it's better if people had a human to root for, and I have arguments against that. But the argument that did make sense to me was that as Deckard has become more and more machine-like in his hunting and killing of replicants, the replicants show more and more emotion as the film goes on, and they show that they're becoming more like humans, and he has been more of a machine, although through them, he is beginning through Rachel, and then later through his interaction with Roy, he is becoming more human again. It's that blurring of the line between what is a person, a human, and what is a machine.
Well,
and how do we behave sometimes as machines?
So the interaction with Roy took completely different in my head. The whole end sequence of Deckard versus Roy, right? It's really the hunter becomes the hunted.
True.
All of a sudden, right? You've got this machine who is hunting you down versus you hunting down the machine. And it's this role reversal that really makes you realize sometimes we are creators of our own demise.
Definitely.
Right? And I really think Roy saves Deckard because he realizes that he too is a machine.
Possibly. I also think notice he toys with him. Like he breaks his fingers. This one's for Pris. This one's for Zora. And he toys with him. He could have killed him right there, but he doesn't. And he chases him all around, and then he says, it's a terrible thing to live in fear, because he wants him to know what it's like to be hunted. He wants him to feel that same emotion that he's been feeling of being constantly pursued and hunted, and that death is around the corner at all times. He wants him to feel that. And then he doesn't kill him. But it seems like in that final moment, he realizes how much he loved life, how much more life he wants. And when he talks about the memories disappearing, like Tears in the Rain, the famous line, that Rutger Hauer did not improvise on set. He actually rewrote a monologue. He kept pieces of it, but he wrote that line himself, but did not improvise off the top of his head, as the story has been told sometimes. But I think he doesn't want to destroy that in Deckard. Whether he's a human or a machine, he realizes that very much the value of life, because he has killed a lot of people to get to that point. But it seems like he just does not want his last act to be a killing. He wants it to be an act of saving or of evolution. But it seems like there's something else he wants there.
Okay.
So the good, the bad, and the ugly.
No, I think that's a valid point in ways. I think you're right. I don't think he wants his last act to be ugly, but I also think he really does trigger this idea that Deckard, it's almost like he has a flash and he realizes that Deckard really might be a replicant. And that possibility might be real. Because let's be truthful. Let's have this replicant argument, shall we?
Uh-oh.
Let's have this replicant. Why would you send humans to go ahead and hunt down killing machines? That makes no sense. You would send another machine to hunt down that killing machine because humans are too valuable.
But you wouldn't let it know it's a machine, because then it might learn how to empathize with the machines it's trying to kill.
Exactly. So you just create a more advanced machine, which was very obvious that Tyrell Corp did, right? In Rachel and seeing Rachel. And then all of a sudden it becomes not really a far leap to think that Harrison Ford, Deckard, is also a replicant.
And they hinted it throughout. When Rachel is talking to him about, have you ever accidentally retired a human? It seems like maybe she's trying to get at something about what he is and what it would mean for a machine to kill a human instead of the other way around. And he says, it's not my, replicants are just a machine. It's not my job to deal with them if they're doing fine. It's only if something's going wrong, which, like I said, seems to lend credence to your argument. And she does ask him that question about whether or not he's ever taken the Voight-Kampff himself. But he never answers, and she never asks again. Also, the fact that all of their eyes, at some point in the film, there's an intentional effect that was done, and I am forgetting the name of the effect, but everyone's eyes glow red that's a replicant. Now, Ford has said that was some light catching his eye by mistake that was meant for Sean Young. But who knows? Because you see it in the Owl, you see it in Roy, you see it in all the replicants. And it's meant to be sort of a design flaw, which we're going to get to eyes later. I'm going to save the eyes. But I need to give a little bit of context to this discussion about Deckard being a replicant, because when we watched this film for the first time, 20 minutes in is the scene with Rachel and Deckard meeting. So, right away, it's somewhat apparent that Rachel is the Nexus 6 that Deckard has been sent over to look at. Not entirely, because Tyrell muddies the water a little bit there by saying, I want the test on a human, and tries to prove how much more human she is by it took 100 questions with the Voight-Kampff test to determine. But Joelle takes a look at her and says, well, she's too perfect. She's obviously a replicant. That wasn't the real kicker. That comes a short while later when Deckard is in his apartment looking at the pictures, and she's thinking about it, and she goes, he's really like a loner and removed from other people. He's got to be a replicant. Because wouldn't you program not only a machine to kill other machines, but you'd make them really not want to spend time with other people, just to keep them isolated from discovering emotion and other things. And so he's got to be a replicant. 20 minutes in, I had to pause the movie and take a good hard stare at Joelle, mind blown completely that she has already figured this out.
And this is why you married me.
Yes.
Well, to be fair, I actually hadn't heard the argument. I didn't really even know what Blade Runner was about. Obviously, I had been exposed to things like I, Robot and other movies and cultural mechanisms that talk about robots, machines, humans versus non-humans. So to me, it just became more of an obvious thing of why would the government want to use humans when they don't have to use humans? That humans are treated as a different type of life source, and what Deckard is doing is extremely dangerous.
Mind you also, this is before, and spoiler alert, if you have not seen the sequel, don't listen to me right now. This is before we saw 2049, which they do use that concept of a replicant hunting other replicants. So this was not something that came from that. She had come up with this theory well before we saw that.
Yes. And then that was another 3 hours of my life I can't ever get back.
We are not getting into that.
Okay.
Please do not send emails and Twitter destroy us for saying that. We can get into that privately, separately, if anyone wants to have a 9-hour discussion on 2049. We'll do that offline.
I'll definitely say this. The original, to me, Blade Runner, like so many other movies that have sequels, Blade Runner really did a bang-up job of so many different things, of just creating this neo-noir city in LA, of really just saying like, hey, this is what life might be in the future, the constant rain, right, indicating climate change, the Asian cultures permeating the city, and really discussing this idea of human versus robot and what the future can truly bring and what it might look like. And in some ways romanticizing that idea, which I'm not opposed to, and in some ways depressingly, right, through all of that rain, sort of kind of saying, this is what we can become. So the movie did so many different things on a bunch of different levels that it's kind of no wonder why they did that voiceover sequence in a little bit. I don't know that I would have fully appreciated this had I seen this when this came out, 82, when I was 5. I definitely wouldn't have appreciated it. Maybe not even until I was more like in my teenage years when I might have appreciated it. And then as an adult watching it and seeing all the different nuances, it's completely different. And I think that's what Blade Runner is so good at. It is so good at every time you watch it, you're going to pick up something different. Every time you read about it, you're going to pick up something different and then rewatch it. And you can rewatch it in all of 5 different cuts. Right?
Yes, there are many, many cuts of it. And of course, as we said at the beginning, the one Joelle has seen is the 2007 final cut. Of course, I have seen several of the versions, including the 1982, which was the only one available when I first saw this, not in the theater, but on VHS cassette in the mid-'80s when it first became available. I saw it, or maybe it was on HBO. But at the time, I just thought it was cool because there were flying cars and because, Zora is topless at one point. And that's about what a, young teenage boy is gonna get necessarily. But with each watching of every few years, there's so many more textures and layers that have come out of it. And I think part of what makes that so beautiful and effective is the world building that was done.
Oh, I'm telling you to put your hands down because every time you do this,
yes,
I hear feedback in the thing.
Oh, I was talking with my hands.
And you're like doing this.
Yeah,
and
I get animated, so I'm going to have to tie my hands down.
I get animated too. I'm Jamaican. Hello.
Yes, and we're sort of just starting to figure out what I am, but that's another story for another day. But
I'll edit.
So what makes it so beautiful and effective for me?
Oh, wait, is this your good?
Yeah, this is going to be part of my good, is the world building. Is that and this has been written about in a million books, but the finely textured detail and look of the film.
You're not allowed to have my same good.
Well, how about I comment on your good, and then I have a different good?
No. You keep going, and I'll comment on your good.
Okay.
Finely textured detail.
Yeah, the design team, the production designers, the set decorators, did an amazing job. And usually you don't see all the detail in there, but Ridley Scott is purported to have said, if you make it, I'm going to show it. That's why we see so much of the detail surrounding the characters at all times. And it really, really gives it a feel of a place that is not only lived in, but is neglected. And again, that's drawing on the commentary about humans. We can build something so beautiful as an exact copy of ourselves, and yet we're going to live in this decay and let these beautiful buildings like the Bradbury fall into such utter disrepair. And, the darkness of it and the wetness of it and all of those pieces are so atmospheric. And of course, that is capturing the noir feel. If you've ever watched a noir film like Double Indemnity or Maltese Falcon or any of those, you really should, and then watch Blade Runner, and you'll see where everything from the clothing to the score is coming from. And that's where the voiceover did fit to some degree. It was terrible, it was unnecessary, it fills in some cool little details we can touch on later, but it's just that look and feel in this ultra-modern futuristic set of buildings like the police headquarters, but then it has an office inside of it that is all wood, which looks straight out of a 1940s or 50s noir private detective gumshoe type office, filled with relics, old microphones, and the lamp, which looks ancient. Funny enough, it actually has a picture of a man with a dead buffalo that he's killed, and so it, I think they're connecting that to Deckard's role, or the Blade Runner's role of hunting replicants to extinction, at least the ones that are doing things they aren't supposed to be doing. A lot of the detail that you see throughout the city was due to working with Sid Mead, visual futurist, and you can really see his stamp on a lot of the interiors and exteriors throughout, and a lot of those little details. What's really interesting to me in films like this is that no one seems to have predicted things like the internet or security cameras everywhere, or, I don't know, Bluetooth tracking. You could have put a couple of those in a replicant. Even mobile phones, although drunk dialing does still obviously exist. We're looking at you, Deckard. But most of all, it was comforting to see that chopstick technology has not changed at all. So all of those things put together, and the miniatures, of course, the miniatures that make up the city are astounding.
Like I said, folks, verbose. Actually, I want to say ditto to all of that. I really liked that the film as a whole was progressive, but still had a nod to the 40s, like this neo-noir concept. In that, in our progression, sometimes we still falter back on something that's historical, right? So we've gone so far, but yet we still create this style that is so reminiscent of the 1940s and noir film. So that was my good.
And as people, we're always so self-referential in like fashion and things like that, everything old is new again, that we just sort of recycle it and change it up a little bit. And I guess it kind of touches on that theme as well, that as humans, there's only so much new we can come up with.
I mean, that's this whole podcast, isn't it?
Indeed.
Right? Okay. So the bad. Dun, dun, dun.
I think we have the same bad.
No. We don't have the same bad. That's my ugly.
Oh, that's your ugly.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
Oh, I thought I had a bad, but it actually turned out to be what I think is a good. So I might have to come back around to that.
This is not a freaking job interview. What is that answer? Okay, I'm going to tell you my bad.
I know my bad.
Okay,
yeah.
Go. Yeah.
My bad is that there are almost no people of color in this film. And my question...
I mean, Asian people.
They're Asians as background, except for the guy who makes eyes, the engineer, who's obviously brilliant.
All the brilliant folks are Asian.
Oh, and then there's the woman who, I don't know what her job is. She's like a street vendor geneticist who is like finding serial numbers on snake scales on the street out of a vending cart. I'm not entirely sure what that job is.
Well, that's because the Asians have permeated so much that there are a dime a dozen, and ergo you can get your geneticism on the go.
Yeah. So you just geneticist on the street.
Yep.
Get a hot dog and your DNA read.
Basically.
Well, I feel like where that is very problematic is, okay, so they build an army of basically labor, soldiers, slaves. Who are those soldiers fighting out in space, by the way? And they're all white. So either the filmmakers were making a very conscious decision of, we really don't want to build black slaves in here because that's a whole nother conversation. But is it trying to say that Terrell is trying to...
reparations.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, is that there could be some reparations in there. You know, the white people are going to do all the work, the tough work. Or is Terrell trying to play God in, you know, as is hinted at in 2049, that maybe he put Deckard and Rachel together to make a baby? And is he trying to replace humans with self-replicating replicants that are only making white babies? I don't know. It just seemed like there's a whole lot of lack of diversity, but the hopefulness of that is maybe people of color have achieved some sort of higher status and have moved off world. That's a whole story in there that I feel like is never addressed. And they had the opportunity in 2049 and they didn't.
So that's a pretty good list of bads. Mine is just a little bit more superficial than that. I have two. Can I have two? I'm going to have two.
Oh, all right.
I'm going to have two. They'll be short.
You know I give you whatever you want.
I know. That's why I married you. The first one is, what the hell with that bubble hairdryer? Can we talk about the bubble hairdryer for a minute? Just for 1 minute, let's talk about that hairdryer.
Farrah Fawcett would have killed for that hairdryer.
Yeah, but no woman of color would ever have killed for that dryer because you just would have had an instant afro puff. Like, it only could have been literally a person with super straight hair that would have been okay with that bubble blow dryer. It's just not. Yeah. It's just not real.
Yeah, see,
that's not real.
Point taken. And if there's any humidity going on, it's just, you're just going to frizz.
Obviously, there's humidity because it's LA, but
it's LA and
LA
raining.
Yeah, raining LA. And then I have a second one. I love Daryl Hannah in things like Splash, but is it coincidence that she was named Pris in this movie? Because that's kind of the character she plays a lot. And maybe it was typecasting. Maybe she could not say no to a role. But she seems to always be typecasted as this character who's kind of innocent, but not really innocent, and a little bit manipulative. And I'm not sure that I buy it any longer. And obviously this comes from seeing many of her works over a course of time and not necessarily seeing this as one of her first. Like, I think it's like within her first 5 roles. But Daryl Hannah, I wish she would have played more things.
Now, do you know who the original choice for the Pris character was?
Who?
Debbie Harry.
Interesting.
Yep. Her record company did not want her doing a film at that time. And she says she regrets the decision. But Debbie Harry was going to be Pris. I think the issue I would have had with Debbie Harry in that role is that I would have been imagining a version of the Rapture rap. Would have gone something like, "There's Replicants and Blade Runners 2. Watch out, Roy. Deckard's coming for you."
Oh, God. You're so cheesy. It's awesome, but it's cheesy.
But see, it keeps you laughing. So if nothing else, there's the value.
I will probably never not laugh with you.
And we'll probably just get sued by Debbie Harry.
No, because it's a parody. That's how Weird Al circumvents that entire thing. Right. It's a parody.
But he always asks permission.
No, he doesn't always ask for permission. That's a misnomer. He might ask, but he doesn't always get it.
He actually thought he had permission to use Gangster's Paradise, which is Coolio, right?
Right.
And he didn't. And Coolio threatened him. So for years they had a sort of a feud, and they made up at a some conference or something a few years back. But yeah, apparently he thought they had permission and didn't, or that's just the story that he told because he really wanted to do the song.
And I think you're safe. I think Debbie Harry is cool enough that she could appreciate you utilizing a styling, because technically you aren't using the music.
Well, see, and she was tied to Blade Runner in the end anyway, through us.
I'm sure she's thrilled.
Mm-hmm. I know it.
But I want her so badly to not be this character that just seems to be the same character that's played over and over again. And she was really good at playing that character. I guess for me, retrospectively now, it just seems to always be the same character, no matter what movie she's in. So please don't send me any emails. I love Daryl Hannah. I really think she was awesome in Splash. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. That's the only thing that struck a chord to me, was that everybody else was playing, and not that Harrison Ford has not been playing sort of a similar hero type character. There were just a lot of different levels to everybody else's character, and I don't necessarily feel like Pris's levels were all that great.
I do have to give her the Good Soldier Award, the Champ Award, for that scene where she falls through the window of the car when they first meet Sebastian, where she runs and she slips and hits the window of the car, and Sebastian's like so turned on by her that he doesn't even notice the window of his car is broken. He doesn't give a damn. But she actually slipped and fell and fractured her elbow. It chipped in 7 places, and she continued with the scene and finished out the scene with a busted up elbow. Pretty impressive as a person, if not an actor, to not be like, screw this, I'm going to the hospital now, to actually finish out and continue with that.
Okay.
But I would agree with you. She's very much the same.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back around to this in my ugly, but I feel like, in a way, that typecast that she always is playing, that same character, works for a specific reason, and I'm going to come back around to that.
Now to the ugly. And we both concur on this, I feel like.
And I think that it is universally concurred upon.
I'm not trying to be a hater, but Harrison Ford, your love scenes are lacking love. They're just lacking a little bit of, chemistry. It was painful to watch. It was just painful to watch two extremely attractive people kissing awkwardly. So much so that I feel like if they had a love scene, they've cut the love scene out.
Well, actually, the makers of it didn't call it a love scene. They called it a hate scene because it was supposed to be a love scene, but the two, Harrison Ford and Sean Young, hated each other so much that when he's sort of knocking her around a little bit, it was because he so disliked her. So that love scene, there's no love in that scene.
I mean, but that's also why you're called actors. And there are a lot of actors who kiss other actors that don't like them or don't have any attraction to them. And that's why it's called acting. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, just like Daryl Hannah, this also seems to be a pattern for Mr. Ford, sadly. Just watch before you judge me. Just watch and look at those love scenes. And you want him to be this amazing lover because he's so burly and manly and take charge. And you want them to have this really great, passionate scene where it crosses all sorts of boundaries. You just don't get it.
It's kind of cold fish kiss, it looks like.
Yeah. No, it's like forced.
Which actually Cold Fish is in the narration that his wife used to call him, which that's an interesting part of the narration, is that he had a wife and she called him Cold Fish, which is a terrible line of dialogue, but it does help to explain his kissing.
It's awful. But now let's do some production notes with Parry.
I didn't get to do my ugly.
Oh, your ugly's not the same ugly as my ugly?
No, my ugly is actually slightly different.
Okay.
My ugly is pretty much the entire relationship between Deckard and Rachel.
No, not the whole thing.
I feel like there are moments, But overall, not only does it seem to lack real chemistry, but there's a couple of moments of like, hashtag me too, when he's like shaking her around and throws her against the window. Either that or he's the dominant. And, and then he's telling her like, say kiss me, say it louder, say you want me. And he's really pushing it.
Isn't that the idea of control over a machine?
Well, and that's what I was going to say is he, in that moment, is treating her like a replicant. He's not treating her like a person, and he's treating her like a machine. And maybe that could be indication that he's realizing he's one too, and that's upsetting him.
Self-hate.
Self-hating, yeah. But I also kind of feel like, unfortunately, if we look at women in the film in general, is that you've got Rachel, who he's sort of abusing her, and she gets pushed around a lot. We've got
No, but she's a badass who shot dude.
She did. She shot poor Brian James in the head. If I thought it was intentional that they were making a point about how different women are treated, especially when they're used as slaves, and who knows, maybe having pleasure replicants got rid of sex slavery and human trafficking, although more likely that just became highly exotic after that. But it's interesting how Ford is so rough with Rachel, but Roy, who has killed many people and is a soldier by construction, is so tender with Pris. And when she's dead, he kisses her a couple of times, and he's truly deeply anguished by her death. And what I also feel like is he is like any good revolutionary. He's like teaching his people, and she's like one of his devotees, teaching her to appreciate what she is and to be free from the slavery of whatever system. Like the scene where she says, I think, therefore I am. And she sounds like an idiot when she says it. And I thought at first it was just delivery. But what I realized was, and he compliments her, he's very good, Pris. Or that's right, Pris. And basically I think he's encouraging her to have her own sense of self and her own agency, even though she's not very bright and by design. He's trying to free her from that. And he's being more tender as these two machines than the supposed human is with a machine.
Okay. So I agree with you that, yes, Roy can be more tender. And I think that's where we start to blur lines between human versus machine.
Yeah.
So I agree with that assessment, but I don't necessarily agree with the assessment of women in the way in which you're telling it. Now, Daryl Hannah might play the same role, but the role is I'm all innocent and sweet, but truly I'm actually manipulative.
Right.
Which is a very different picture than I'm just an airhead.
Right.
She uses that to her advantage because that is what people think about her, or that is what she can play off of. So
is that a positive, though?
Well,
that she's smarter than she appears, yes.
It's more of a positive than she's an airhead.
Right. But that she has to hide it is not positive.
I don't know that she's intentionally hiding it in order to get what she wants. Mm-hmm. So that seems not bad. That just seems manipulative.
Yeah.
Which takes brains and cunning. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. And Rachel is smart in that she keeps going to Deckard. She knows that he's the key to out, whatever that looks like. She's trying to call out Harrison Ford. I really believe that she also thinks that he too might be a replicant after she understands that she is a replicant. And as far as, is it Zora?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, she's totally a badass. Let's be real. She is an assassin and a stripper all in one.
And the fact that she can run through the city in a whatever holster plexiglass bra or whatever that is.
No, that bra's not real. That bra's not real. That's not really real, folks. There's no way women could really wear that and be okay all day long.
Well, I think your comment on it was really telling as to, depends on your bust size, as to whether or not you could actually run in that.
You can't.
Piece of
without falling out.
True. Cool. Maybe a lot of Hollywood tape?
That was pre-Hollywood tape. You'd have to be really taped in.
It's the future. There's Hollywood tape for everyone.
No, really taped in. I could not wear that ever. Never, ever, never.
There's not like Hollywood tape dispensers along the street.
No.
So a quick piece of trivia about Zora, played by Joanna Cassidy. She was not allowed to do the crashing through the windows death sequence in the original version of the film. They had a stunt double do it. That is not a very convincing stunt double. But for the 2007 final cut, they actually filmed her running, and then they digitally imposed that over the stunt double from the original footage so that you could actually see correctly her face crashing through that glass.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is it's sort of a bizarre sequence. The slow, like how many glass panes, it was almost to the point of comedy. I know it was supposed to be extremely dramatic, and it is, but she hit so many windows at a point. I thought maybe there was going to be a couple of guys walking by with a mirror, pots and pans and glasses and things falling down. But still, with the sax music playing and everything, it is still a very somber scene.
And here we are, production notes with Parry. I mean, that's a good segue if I've ever heard one. You're already talking about the production, and there was a lot to talk about on this production. Man, what a lot of gossip happening. Rebellion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the big stories to come out of it was, of course, the fact that Ridley Scott made a comment about the differences in difficulty of working with an American crew, because he'd only worked with British crews before that. And of course, the American crew took exception to those comments and showed up with T-shirts that said something like, yes, governor, my ass, to push back at him. And so the next day he comes back with a T-shirt that says xenophobia sucks. And it went back and forth for a while.
Well, and then Harrison Ford didn't really want to do the voiceover. So obvious. He and Ridley Scott didn't get along too great. They've since made up.
No one got along with Sean Young.
Things happen, I guess. But is there anything else you want to include in production notes with Parry?
Well, I just want to include that they only had one street. They redressed one street for that. But they shot everything so tightly. And that's what gives it that claustrophobic feeling. But that was also so that they could shoot all over this one street, and it felt like it was parts of all of downtown Los Angeles. So they were, shooting with long lenses to keep, to compress that shot and keep it very, very tight. But that gives it such an amazing, like I said, just very closed-in feel. Also, the miniatures are extraordinary and hold up really, really well to this day.
Totally.
Yeah, the spinners look great, and often superimposed flying things of that era look very shaky and jittery, and you can very much tell they're beautiful. They look very, very 21st century in terms of the production quality.
The Tyrell building was just astounding.
And, of course, it's very cool in its design in that it was very Egyptian, a pyramid. And, of course, the Egyptians were obsessed with life after death and
eyes.
And we'll come back to that in a moment. The cool thing to talk about with the city is that if you look at the Tyrell building, all that texturing on the front, that's done with cut brass, which was common practice in miniatures because of the level of detail that you could put on the side of something using that material. And sadly, we're seeing less and less of that because miniatures are mostly getting replaced with CG. But a neat little side note is that hidden in the city are some little Easter eggs, tributes to characters or the director in the film. Hidden in that cityscape is one of the aliens from Ridley Scott's Alien. There's a spaceship from Space 1999, and I'm not sure which character that was connecting to, but the big one is the Millennium Falcon is actually hidden within the city. And you can see it for yourself. When they're coming into the police station, they pass over a building. It has some platforms on top. And it was one of the crew was making his own homebrew model of the Millennium Falcon and wanted that they wanted it included because they needed to fill in some of the buildings. So they just dressed it out, and it's in there, of course, in tribute to Harrison Ford. So that's some cool stuff. But
Harrison Ford and the Millennium Falcon?
yeah, I know. Right?
Just kidding. Just kidding.
I thought it was just Ray.
I'm not that person. I'm not that person. Don't even.
So, and of course, my friend Dave Hardberger worked on the miniatures and has some stories to tell as well. And we're going to include those in the special features for this podcast.
The eyes have it. Go for it.
So, of course, the theme of eyes is pretty apparent in the film. Again, and going to that idea of what makes a human, the eyes being the window to the soul. And not only that the eyes are the window in, but that the eyes reveal so much in the emotion we show in our eyes. And the motif is consistent throughout. The film opens with an eye looking out over the cityscape. There's debate as to whose eye it is. The Voight-Kampff machine determines your proof of humanity through your eyes. Roy and Leon question the geneticist who made their eyes, and Roy says, if only you could see what I've seen with your eyes. Terrell's trifocals, and then Terrell's death when Roy pops out his eyes as he's killing him. The way Pris paints over her eyes when she expects death to come soon. And, this is all directly tied to the theme of memories, and that not only do we form most of our memories through our eyes, but it's how memory is directly connected to our sense of self. And, Rachel thinks she's human because of her memories. And Leon keeps his memories through photographs. And so does Deckard. He has a bunch of photographs on his piano. But all the focus on memories seems to be asking, if no one remembers us, did we ever really exist at all?
That just makes me want to sing Private Eyes. They're watching you. Songs. Yay! Great segue. Awesome segue. Was totally accidental. So soundtrack smashes. This soundtrack was written by Vangelis, or composed by Vangelis, and was nominated for the BAFTA Awards, Golden Globe Awards, but it wasn't released until 10 years after the film. And then in 2007, when they released the special edition of Blade Runner, they also released a special edition of the soundtrack containing not only the songs that were from the film, but also newer songs that were still inspired by the film. But I will say this, the one song that gets me is the love theme. And that love theme is so promising. And I think that's probably why the love sequence becomes the ugly part for me, because that love theme is so promising. It's giving you that great picturesque feeling of the city emanating. You have the sax giving you the noir feeling. It really sets the scene, and it sounds still hopeful. And that's the best part about the soundtrack for me, is that feeling of hopefulness and light, even within the rain or the context of the rain. And that's a whole lot of thought into one song that has 0 lyrics.
My favorite track is still the main theme, the main title theme. And I think for the same reasons, is that it captures the darkness and claustrophobia of the film, and yet there are notes of hope in it. And I think what it's saying, much like the whole film, is that we as humans are capable of such horrific and terrible things, but simultaneously we can create such incredible and beautiful things and be so good to each other. And as it moves back and forth with that throughout the film, I think it echoes the themes, and it keeps the film from becoming so dark as to making it difficult to watch, because that hope is still there, and you don't see that in the city anywhere, other than the hope that Atari will still be around in the future, because the logo is still there, even though the company itself is no longer. But that's the only hope I see in the rest of it. That, and that origami survives. But yeah, I feel like
origami survives. Seriously,
yes, that origami has not been lost.
That's your takeaway.
My question is, can Edward James Olmos really do origami? Did he do that himself, or was that stunt origami?
I have no words. I have no words. So
I also am partial to Rachel's theme too.
you're partial to like everything.
Yes, but that one, I think through repeated listenings, I have grown to appreciate more. There's some Vangelis in general, I really enjoy. I used to love the closing credits theme, but the more I've watched the film, the more it doesn't really fit with the rest of the film. The rest of it is moody and multi-textured, and that one just sounds like a cool space action movie. So I like it as a standalone track, but I don't think it captures the film as well.
Well, maybe it's just gearing you up for the next chapter.
Which came 30 years later.
That's okay. People will say, well, at least it came.
And I will note that that the soundtrack also came out on as a reissue vinyl for Record Store Day 2017, one that I had to hunt down specially.
Yeah, we like our vinyl. Oh, yeah. One more note on the soundtrack was that really it was one of the early beginnings of this electronic music. So it's regarded as, one of the founding blocks of electronic music, house music. EDM, whatever your generation is what you call it. Techno music, as we referred to it in the 90s.
Of course, if you want to look back further to who inspired Vangelis, you can look back to, or Vangelis, I believe it is, look back to, of course, Moog and the Moog synthesizer and people like Walter/Wendy Carlos with the album Switched on Bach and the Clockwork Orange soundtrack. Those are some real founders there, as well as Vangelis.
All right. I think that's it for Soundtrack Smashes. That's a whole lot of information.
That we hope you wanted.
If you didn't want it, you got it anyway. So that's really that part about it. Oh, anything else you wanted to add?
I have to say that for a one-off character in the film who we only see for... Well, okay, we see him in two scenes, but he really has the one main scene, is M. Emmett Walsh as Police Chief Bryant. He captures so many textures of personality in that character. In the narration, they talk a little bit more about him and the kind of person that he is. But I don't think it was necessary because you can see it in the way he not only talks to Deckard and treats him like a bit of a jerk, but also the way he looks at him whenever he is talking about the replicants. He just keeps looking over at him, and it's kind of like that guy, and we've all known that guy, who tells you like really off-color or racist jokes, but doesn't get that you don't find them as funny as he does. It also seems like he's looking for a reaction from his comments, and that gives, again, lends more to your argument that he knows he's a replicant because he's looking for a reaction.
Lends more to the truth because he is a replicant.
I think if we are going to...
The unicorns, he's a replicant. It's Ovs.
Which the unicorn sequence was not in the original, so I think that the addition of that says a tremendous amount about...
A lot.
Yeah.
Any more takeaways?
Deckard's apartment walls. They were, not only were they covered in all kinds of weird little electronics and things, those were interesting, but there was a texturing to it that had a funky shape. And it was bugging me because it looked like it would get covered with dirt and dust and that it would be damn near impossible to keep clean. So it was making me crazy every time they showed that apartment wall. And obviously Deckard was not programmed to clean anything.
Yeah, and all I'm hearing is that I married my father in that statement. We're so OCD with the walls.
I saw no cleaning products whatsoever in Deckard's apartment.
Well, it might be futuristic. They might have something that totally takes care of it. They might have a robot that runs up the side of the wall and vacuums it. I mean, who knows? Wall Roombas, exactly. Who knows? Who knows?
Or maybe
so
it's
OCD.
repels dust like the book covers in Back to the Future 2. So,
yeah, this is just one instance where you think you're never going to marry your father, but you do.
Hey.
So, shameless plug. We hope you've liked this podcast enough to go ahead and keep checking us out on youhaven'tseenwhatmovie.com and let us know what you think. Go ahead and send any requests for movies. We can't guarantee that we're going to actually do them, but maybe there's something that we haven't seen and we need to see it. So give us your arguments as to why we need to see it. I don't know, Parry, what else?
Well, and we would love to hear about not only your feelings on the movie of Blade Runner, but kind of what you were going through at that time in your life that you saw it and how that connected to you at that time. You know, it's always interesting to hear how a movie has a place in your life. And that,
You
again,
sound so Deepak Chopra right now. But keep going.
Well, and this is exactly why we're doing this, is because of how these movies connect to us. You know, Blade Runner meant something to me, and I wanted to pass that on to Joe to enjoy and appreciate, and would love to hear those thoughts from all of you on what the meanings are for you personally.
So check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at You Haven't Seen What Movie. There also is our website, youhaven'tseenwhatmovie.com, where you can go ahead and write to us or check out some blog posts. We'll have links to the movies that we're discussing, as well as any relevant books or cool things that we think you guys might need to see. And we hope that you'll be back with us next week when I put Parry through his paces in a movie that I've seen, but he hasn't. And it is definitely a what moment? So stay tuned. Thanks again.
I look forward to it with sheer terror.
It's not terrifying at all. It's awesomeness.
All right. If it's 80s, it's awesome.
That's all for today, folks. And remember,
Be kind.
rewind.
Bye.
Bye.